All right, that is the rock and roll sounds of 1-800-BAND singing their hit Des Moines, which can only mean that we are no longer recording in a car. Hello, everybody. I am Tony Gerdeman. You are listening to Buckeye Weekly. Here, as always, with me and you is Tom Orr. You can follow Tom on Twitter at TomOrr4 or on MySpace at Blink182 for life. Tom, how's it going?
It's going great. And just because of that, now I'm not going to edit the music at the beginning of the show, and you're going to sound like a real dope. It's going to be fantastic.
Put some like Guns N' Roses in there. Like, people think, what an idiot.
What hilarious copyright infringement we just committed.
Yeah, so hello, everybody. We are actually not recording in the car. There was nothing on Wednesday, so we decided, you know what, let's go back to our customary Tuesday recording session for a Wednesday delivery. And there will be no rain, I assume, no hail, probably no beeping of a van backing up. So, Tom, this has the potential to be a show.
Of all the lofty aspirations we have, that is certainly one of them. We will deliver you a show. We might get my dog, because I just was looking down and realizing the dog door is about 3 feet from where I record. So it's possible you'll hear a dog just blasting through a dog door at about 1,000 miles an hour at some point. So that's my recording at home version of a truck backing up right next to us.
So like when we start talking about the running game and how J.K. Dobbins is running it up in there, then we'll hear like the dog come bursting through.
It would be a really good Saquon Barkley thing, but he's gone and also didn't play for Ohio State. So,
Tom, let's not do puns. No puns.
I would say we're better than that, but you've heard this show. You've heard this show before, so you know that we're not better than that.
So the last time we've talked to you guys, we've spoken with Larry Johnson and the defensive line, Kevin Wilson and the tight ends, Greg Stadrawa and the offensive line, and also Ryan Day. So we'll cover all of that and then some more things. First, I wanted to begin with Larry Johnson and the defensive line. And Tom, we finally learned, I guess, this past week that we know about the changes in the back seven with the bullet, the hybrid linebacker, but there's also been a change up front in terms of the scheme that they're running there, and they're going more north-south instead of east-west on the defensive line. And when I think back about like Larry Johnson, my entire knowledge of him has always been about his defensive line going straight upfield to get the quarterback. And I remember watching a video of him when he was at Penn State, and he's like, I want my guys to go get the quarterback, and if the quarterback hands the ball off, then they'll just get the running back because that's where they're going. And to hear them talk about how they're moving now back towards that, and you think of everything that Greg Schiano did for this defense or did to this defense.
The latter, yes, go on.
And the linebackers playing up on the defensive line to help the defensive line out, and slanting and running sideways rather than getting upfield. I almost feel bad for what Larry Johnson had to go through last year, because it's not what he wanted. It was like when Kerry Combs had to coach off man his first 2 years. That's not what he wanted, but these are good soldiers. And now it feels like, from talking to the defensive line, they are much happier to be doing this, getting after the quarterback, getting upfield, and not worrying about other gaps, just worrying about the guy in front of them and the gap in front of them. And Larry Johnson has to be happier about it too.
I would certainly assume that he is. He's someone who he has such a good reputation for developing players, for churning out just spectacular defensive lines year after year, that it's almost a little strange that you would tell him, no, I don't want you to do it the way you've always done it. That's always worked. Let's do something different. Let's get away from what's been successful from you for decades and do it my way. That does not seem like something you would want to do when you have someone who is as renowned and experienced as Larry Johnson. So if you can get back to what he has figured out is the best way to do it, I think you have to do that.
Talking to Jonathan Cooper, and none of these guys want to bash what the defense was last year, what they're asked to do, but he said his unit as a whole, the entire defensive line, feels more comfortable doing this. The linebackers feel more comfortable doing what they're doing. We'll find out about the corners, although I think maybe moving to some more zone is probably a good thing for a few of those guys. We don't need to say who. You can put your own 2 and 2 together on that one. But the guys seem more comfortable, happier with the changes, but that's just, the case because things are different, so they're better, and we're happier doing this because that's what we're doing now. And I can't say I'm unhappy because I'm doing it. And if you start to put out like negativity, then obviously that's not going to work for you. So everybody's happy. We'll see how it goes. I assume, like, let's talk like Chase Young, for instance, who is probably this is going to be his last year at Ohio State. Now he'll be able to be more aggressive, which he was already aggressive last year, and sometimes it cost them. But it was interesting in talking to Larry Johnson about what it will take for Chase Young to become a better, more complete player this year. And he said, he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, he's got the speed and the strength. Now it's just the little things. It's the hands, it's the foot placement, and it's the get off and not having any false steps, and there's just all of the little techniques and film study and film work that a lot of guys can get away with not doing for a while until it's time to maximize your potential. And this is going to be, this will be his contract here, as we like to say here. And you wrote a couple days ago, is Tyreek Smith the next great Ohio State defensive end? And I saw somebody respond to you on Twitter, like saying, well, is Chase Young there yet? And the way he closed the season, I mean, he was 10.5 sacks, 14.5 tackles for loss. He was pretty darn good, and he's a guy that is looking at, I haven't seen any mock drafts yet, but his name is going to be there in 2020. I think it's okay to put him there because I think offensive coordinators have put him there when they have to worry about him, and offensive line coaches. But he's a guy, Tom, I'm expecting very big things from him this year, even though we see that junior year, and I always go back to Joey Bosa, how much his numbers dropped. But then you look at his brother Nick and things. He was going to have a monster year last year. So if you had to pick one or the other, I mean, like where do you think Chase Young falls into that? Where I expect big things from him, but I also know that great players like Joey Bosa can sometimes still be stunted by an offense that gears towards stopping that one guy.
Sure, there's always the possibility that you get double and triple teamed like Joey Bosa did his last year, and that's going to hold your numbers down. But what I keep going back to is last year in the spring, Chase Young said his goal was 10.5 sacks. And at the end of the year, according to the official stats from Ohio State, Chase Young ended up with 10.5 sacks. And now this year, going into this year, his goal is to break the single season sack record at Ohio State, which is 14 by Vernon Gholston in 2007. And I wouldn't bet against him doing that. That would take quite a season, but it seems like Chase Young, you would go a week or two and just kind of not see him do a whole lot. And then he would have a week where he just completely exploded. He had 3 sacks against Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. He had 2 against Rutgers. He had 2 at Penn State. And then Indiana, Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska, Michigan State, put together, he had half a sack. So that was 5 weeks in the middle of the season where he didn't do a whole heck of a lot. The fact that he's refining his game now, the fact that he is trying to clean up the little stuff, that may be what gets him over the hump. Even if he does get more attention now, that may be what gets him over the hump. Because it wasn't like Nick Bosa was there for a lot of last season. When he got 3 sacks against Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game, Nick Bosa was not on the other side of the line drawing the attention. He was still the guy who people were focusing on in a lot of cases. So unless you're going to dedicate more and more and more to him, I don't know that you can just throw 3 guys at him on every play, because they have talent elsewhere on that line that you can't just focus on Chase Young. You've got to, spread your protection out a little bit, and I think he's going to get his this year.
Right. This isn't Rashawn Gary where you can send everybody at him and you don't have to worry about anybody else being good on that defensive line. This is Ohio State. The other thing with Chase Young is that middle part of the season. I mean, he said he was playing on 2 bum ankles. So this is the production, I think, suffered because he was suffering. And that's another reason why I would expect big things from him this year. Talking with Jonathan Cooper, who was, he started every game last year, except for, I think maybe he missed 1 game. But he's a guy who, 5-star guy as well, hasn't been as productive as he would like. And he said himself that this move towards a more north-south approach, he expects to help him. He's also going to be he said he didn't want to be one of those guys, one of those 5-star guys that comes to Ohio State and just does okay. And he wants to be something more than that. He wants to live up to those expectations and the expectations that he has for himself. And what he had, like 2.5 sacks last year, 5.5 tackles for loss. That's not good enough for a supposed speed rusher, pass rusher, great athlete on the defensive line at defensive end. Where I remember going to one of his high school games and he was playing wide receiver, to give you an idea as to his athleticism, and he played it well. So I would expect a bigger jump from him than what we'll see from Chase Young, because Chase Young doesn't have as far to jump. If you're saying he's saying he's going to get 14.5 sacks, that's, 4 more sacks than he had last year. I would expect, 5 or 6 more from Jonathan Cooper right out of, that's 6.5, 7 sacks. If we're talking, when we talk defensive ends, we have to keep it simple, and it's sacks, it's tackles for loss. We're not going to get into all of the other things. Well, he's this and he's that, and he contains the run. No, we want numbers here. We know that. You want to know 40-yard dashes. We're here to give you that kind of information. We don't need to get complicated, because complicated is hard. So I'm expecting Cooper to have a much better season. But also, I think they'll be able to stay fresher this year because of Tyreek Smith, Tyler Friday, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, if he's in there. I think there's more legitimate, productive options for them this year as opposed to last year, would you say?
Yeah, last year, I think that there was a lot of that defense that was sort of, they had planned the year around having Nick Bosa there, and then all of a sudden when you didn't have Nick Bosa there after the 2.5 games, that kind of forced everyone up a line on the chart and put people in spots that they may not have been completely ready for at times. This year, if you have, if people stay healthy and you have the opportunity to have everyone perform at the level that they're capable of performing at. And just like Chase Young, this is a contract year for Jonathan Cooper. So this is his chance to have a good solid year, get himself drafted. It's only been 2 years since Ohio State had 3 different defensive ends get drafted in the top 3 rounds. So you don't even have to be a starter to be a high NFL draft pick as a defensive end at Ohio State. And I'm sure that's one of Jonathan Cooper's goals, and that I don't think focus is going to be an issue in that room this year.
I wonder if he'll end up being a outside linebacker in the NFL, and I'm guessing he will have to do some of those drills at the pro day and at the combine, because he is not the biggest guy, but he's still 6'3", 260. But he could drop weight if need be, or they can fit him to what they need. The defensive tackles, Robert Landers has been out with various things. I asked Larry Johnson if anything is long lasting, or if he said no, if there was a game he would play. There's just no reason to push him. And even without Robert Landers, right now they've got Devon Hamilton, Tommy Togiai, and Antoine Jackson rolling in at nose tackle. And he said this is as good a group as he's had in a long, long time. And he's just talking about those three. He's not even including Robert Landers in there. So that's a pretty good sign. They've moved Jerron Cage, who was at nose tackle last year. They've moved him to 3-tech. But even at 3-technique, Jerron Cage is still, he's probably fourth at best. So it's a good, deep group. And we'll see. We know Tommy Togiai is going to get on the field. Devon Hamilton's obviously going to get on the field. He's been on the field the last 2 seasons. BB Landers will be out there. I wonder how many snaps there will be for Antoine Jackson. Larry Johnson said there will be snaps because all 4 of those guys, there's no reason to tire any of them out, and they can all go in and replace the guy in front of them. At 3-tech, it really sounds like sophomore Teron Vincent is on top, just based on what Larry Johnson said, because somebody asked him to talk about that group, and he said Teron Vincent, and then you've got it wasn't even it was Jashawn Cornell fighting for a spot, basically is what he said, and then Haskell Garrett third, and then Jerron Cage would be fourth. And we talked about it would probably be a battle between Vincent and Haskell Garrett, but that was before we saw Jashawn Cornell at defensive tackle, I think, first spring practice. And I think that's a good fit for him. But that's another deep group, Tom. Those three guys where I think we both agree Teron Vincent's going to be very productive and very disruptive. And we know Cornell has that defensive end, defensive tackle split where he's probably better inside as a pass rusher than he was outside, because we didn't see too much from him outside. And then Haskell Garrett is the junior now, where he's played a little bit the last 2 seasons, and at some point you either become a starter or co-starter, or you get passed up by the next guy coming in.
Yeah, and I think they're probably pretty comfortable with at least the top 3 there, and maybe the top 4. We've seen enough from Garrett that I think that they would be fine with him getting, being a major part of that rotation. Antoine Jackson last year was just kind of a little bit of a mystery that he played. You saw him just a little bit at the beginning of the year, and then you didn't really see him after that. So we don't have a whole heck of a lot to go on. Haskell Garrett, for the most part last year, looked like he was, did not look out of place when he was out there. And in your third year, you're really enough of a veteran that you're ready to take that. You had a couple of years in the strength program. You're ready to kind of take that leap. So if you've got those 3 guys, and potentially Jackson as well, that's fantastic depth. But you should, dear listener, be very excited about the fact that Teron Vincent is at the top of that list, because with Jashawn Cornell, with Haskell Garrett, those are guys who have been around the top, around the top of the depth chart, around playing time the last couple of years. This is not a second-year player at the top of the depth chart now, potentially, just because no one else is there. That's someone who has earned his way up there, and you saw just a little flashes of him last year. He came in as a 5-star prospect, the son of an NFL player. He's got the genes, he's got the pedigree, he's got the training. You saw him right at the end of last year start to get more playing time. I think he had a sack in the Big Ten championship game. That is someone that you should be very excited about this year, I think. That's someone where the sky is really the limit there. And then at the other position, at the nose position, the depth there might even be better. They have to be able to go 3 deep with guys you're very comfortable with without Landers there. that's incredible depth. I mean, you can go back to Ohio State teams where it's like, yeah, they've got 2 tackles who are they're probably okay with, but beyond that, like, it's not great. And there were go rewind, 3 years? There was a period where Ohio State kept missing on defensive tackles in recruiting, and it was like, oh boy, that's going to be an issue at some point. And boy, that is not an issue this year. That has gotten fixed in a big way. So I think defense, the inside of that defensive line, is a real strength for this team. You've got those guys on the edge who, whether it's Chase Young, Tyreek Smith, Jonathan Cooper, who all have that pedigree to and have started to show it a little bit that they can be those elite players too. That is where the game is won and lost, in the trenches. And we'll get to the offensive line in a little bit, and there's maybe some more questions on that offensive line. But if you have a defensive line that is as good and deep as this year's Ohio State defensive line could be, that is going to go a long way towards turning a good season into a really, truly special season.
Yeah, and I think the guys they have at the nose are explosive enough that when they are out there against an offense that is going up tempo and no huddle, you're still getting to get some pass rush out of those guys, because we know how quick Robert Landers is. Tommy Togiai is, he's amazing at times with his burst and his strength. Calling him, they're saying he's the strongest player on the team. And Devon Hamilton has flashes as well. So obviously you don't want them out there the entire drive. But for flashes, they can give you some pass rush as well. Let's move to Kevin Wilson, because I love talking to Kevin Wilson because he gives you a lot. And he'll tell you basically every answer is it's an entire conversation. And it's not just about tight ends. He coaches the tight ends. He's the co-offensive coordinator. He and Greg Studrawa handle like the run game coordinating. Talking about his tight ends, Tom, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be the year that they use the tight ends. And I'll tell you why. Because they have a lot of good ones. And it's been interesting when, we talk about this every year, and it's a joke. If there are football memes, this is one of them. This is the year they use the tight ends. But they return all 4 of their tight ends. And what both Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson have said is the reason they haven't played a lot of 2 tight ends in the past is because if you're going to play a tight end, then you're taking out Paris Campbell, or you're taking out KJ Hill, or you're taking out Terry McLaurin, or Johnny Dixon, or Austin Mack, or Benjamin Victor. This year, so basically that second tight end wasn't better than the third wide receiver. This year, they believe there's a chance where that second tight end will be better than a third wide receiver. And it's not just because the receivers, and Kevin Wilson explicitly said this, it's not because receivers are down. They won't be down. They're going to be fine. It's because the tight ends have gotten better and have maybe matched the receivers. This is a tight end group that was named the group of the winter. They won the OSU Coaches Award for being the best group over the winter. And they've talked about Jeremy Ruckert as that second tight end playing a bit of an H-back, and Kevin Wilson said everybody who plays tight end has to be able to play tight end, has to be able to flex out, has to be able to play fullback, and do this, do that. And when you bring in a second tight end, now we saw a little bit in one of the practices where Jeremy Ruckert was the second tight end, basically playing a fullback, and then he goes in motion and stays behind the line and catches a little quick hitch. And now he's basically, it's not quite a jet sweep, but it's like a swing pass out to him, and he's the guy that can do something after the pass, after the catch. And Kevin Wilson just talking about all of these different possibilities. He said that's the fun part of this job, is where you have all of these things, all of these possibilities, all of these tight ends that you can put here. And then he goes, and then you've got a guy like DeMario McCall as a second running back, and then he sort of had to just stop himself because there are a ton of options, and a lot of that includes the tight ends this year. And Tom, I think with Luke Farrell, who they love and does everything right, Then you add in a guy like Jeremy Ruckert, who is the receiver of the group. But then you have Rashad Berry, who still everybody still remembers what he is capable of. Those three in there, Jake Hosman has been playing a little bit, but those three give that group more potential than I can't remember an Ohio State tight end group with this much potential. I don't know who else is with Ricky Dudley, Tommy Hoying, and I don't know, Eric Moss. Does that sound right? I don't know. But these three guys are the reason why you could see more, and it wouldn't be a switch in philosophies. It's just like, well, we've got to get our best players on the field, and these guys might be them more often this year.
Right. This is explicitly not a switch in philosophies. This is exactly the philosophy they've always had, which is put the best players on the field and let them make plays. And we've talked in the past about Urban Meyer sitting down and making a list of, his top 10 playmakers. Jeremy Ruckert may very well be on that list this year. So if Jeremy Ruckert is on that list, you got to put him out there. He's someone who is just a really unique weapon because he's 6'5". He's listed at 240 pounds. So that would be a very large wide receiver. But he played wide receiver in high school. He is someone who he came in as a receiver. If you've watched any of his All-Star game footage or his high school film, he's got a fantastic catch radius. He catches everything. He is athletic. He makes guys miss in space. He is a real, last week or 2 weeks ago, Tony Alford called Demario McCall a matchup nightmare because you motion him out of the backfield and then he's on a linebacker, and that's not a winning matchup for the defense. Ruckert is kind of the same way because you get Ruckert out there on some, you split him out wide and he's on, the slot corner, and he's 6'5" and he's going against some guy who's 5'10", and Ruckert's athletic enough that he can out jump him. That is a matchup nightmare right there. So it does feel, this feels so dumb to say this out loud, but this really does feel like the year that maybe Ohio State does actually follow through and throw to the tight end. This is the time of year when there's lots of talk about throwing to the tight end every single year, but it does seem like maybe this is the year that they really kind of mean it, because he doesn't have to be, you do not have to have two inline tight ends and just, 7 guys down in 3-point stances all lined up next to each other. This does not have to be that kind of tight end offense. You can split him out, have him be the slot receiver on one side, and it is nominally a 2 tight end formation, but it doesn't look like a 2 tight end formation. So maybe yes, maybe this is truly the year that it happens. Maybe.
If it was going to happen, it would be this year. It would be a good way to maybe put it. Like,
yeah.
If then it would be this year, because you've got the guys. Another player that Kevin Wilson mentioned kind of in passing was Xavier Johnson at running back. And I don't know if you guys remember, he is a walk-on, came to Ohio State from Cincinnati, a 3-star wide receiver, had offers, FBS offers, I think maybe like Bowling Green, stuff like that. He came to walk on Ohio State, 3-star wide receiver, played corner last year, is at running back now and making plays. And Simon, we were there for the Student Appreciation Day. I was watching this number 49 at running back, scored a couple of touchdowns and scored the last touchdown where they made the students choose sides, offense or defense, and whichever side lost in terms of getting that score inside the 5 or whatever it was. They started, I think, at the 10. And so you choose offense or defense. It was Xavier Johnson running that ball in for the touchdown, and that was the second or third touchdown of the day. And I didn't know who it was at the time because 49, I know he's a walk-on running back. A lot of times it doesn't matter because you're never going to see them again. But that's a guy, just keep in mind, I think there's enough weapons where they won't be dipping into the walk-ons. But, we've seen C.J. Saunders earn a scholarship, and that was one of the reasons why Johnson came to Ohio State, is because he believed he could earn a scholarship. Now, coming in and being moved to a corner right away, being like a 6'2", 210-pound corner, that's pretty impressive, but walk-ons playing corner at Ohio State doesn't really, that's not really your path to playing time unless you're Antonio Smith. But you know what? If he's making plays on offense, where that's what everybody assumed would be his destination, would be somewhere on offense. But when Kevin Wilson is talking about DeMario McCall making plays in the passing game as the number 2 running back, and then you got just keep an eye on Xavier Johnson, who was ranked higher than a lot of players signed in the Big Ten that year, ranked higher than a lot of receivers signed in the Big Ten that year, which maybe 2018, I believe.
18.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
And I just double checked because I was pretty sure this was right. He had a Power 5 offer. He had an offer from Iowa State. And the other school that was listed kind of near the top of his interest list is North Dakota State, which, if you follow FCS at all, that is a monster program. That they are a perennial FCS national championship contender, and generally are good for one, quote unquote, surprise upset of a Big Ten team or a Big 12 team just about every year. Some dumb idiot schedules North Dakota State and then
Iowa
pays it. Yeah, Iowa did it. I know Kansas has done it before, but some dumb idiot pays North Dakota State $1 million to come and ruin their season in September. So don't schedule service academies, and don't schedule North Dakota State.
Don't schedule service academies. Tom.
This is less of a position on America and the troops than it is playing the triple option. I dearly, dearly, dearly love the triple option. I am a service academy football fetishist, but if I was an athletic director, I would want no part in playing them. Oklahoma almost learned that lesson last year against Army.
Yeah. Maybe during the summer we assume roles as athletic directors, and the do's and the don'ts, and make America smarter by telling them what they should do and shouldn't do if they are athletic directors.
The real challenge then is when we're North Dakota State's athletic director and no one wants to schedule us, and we have to just play the same team like 4 times. Why are you playing conference teams 3 times out of conference? Well, sorry.
Yeah. Nobody else will play us. And this time it's real, it's not fake like Danny White at UCF.
UCF has never been involved in anything fake in their life.
So we also talked with Greg Stadrawa and several offensive linemen. And Tom, for my money, I really like these guys in terms of talking to them. They're bright, they're articulate, they talk, they're talkative. It's kind of what you need to see from. It seems like it's a strange thing to say from like our vantage point. Like maybe the more talkative offensive lines are the better offensive lines, because they say that's the group that has to communicate and has to be intelligent, and maybe a lot of talking is a sign of intelligence, Tom. I don't know if you know that.
And yet here we are doing a podcast talking at people.
But they're engaging, and they want to talk. They have things to say. I think that's a good sign. There was plenty of good things to say about Josh Myers at center. Now, Ryan Day, we talked to him, and he was like, he's got a shot to win the job, sort of coach speak. Greg Stadrawa, on the other hand, is like, he's our guy. And sure, everybody has to compete, but he is their guy. Stead is completely convinced that he will be able to start for Ohio State and be very good and handle the leadership aspect. And Josh even said, he's become more vocal. And he's embraced that. He doesn't care if his teammates like it or not. Because I asked him, like, how are your teammates taking to your new vocal role? He's like, I don't know. So he's embraced what it means. And I asked, because he was talking about he was a 5-star at one time, 5-star prospect, the number 1 offensive tackle in the nation. And he said, when you are a high school offensive lineman and you're highly rated, they all believe they're going to be offensive tackles in college. And then he got to Ohio State, and he came from a high school that didn't throw the ball. So he came to Ohio State, and he's having to pass block against Nick Bosa and Draymond Jones. And he said, it didn't take long before he realized, I am no longer a tackle. And he was moved to guard maybe by the second period of practice, and the first period is just stretching. So he got moved there, and then eventually he moved to center. And I was talking to him like how, the left tackle is supposed to be this, it's up on a pedestal of offensive line positions. But at Ohio State, that center position is like left tackle everywhere else. And he's like, I know exactly what you're talking about. You figure they've had 3 straight All-Americans, and the guys before that were like Jacoby Bourne and Corey Linsley, who were damn good themselves. And so this is a lot to live up to, but he is saying everything in the right way. He embraces it. He wants to be part of that. And Stud even said that he's viewing Jonah Jackson as a guard because he feels comfortable with the center position with Josh Myers and Matthew Jones. So did you get I don't think you got to talk to Josh Myers or Stud. Did you this past week?
I got to listen to a little bit of Stud before someone else came out. And I talked to Josh Myers for probably 10 minutes during Rose Bowl Media Day a couple months ago. He is just a super impressive kid. And you mentioned offensive linemen and how they're good talkers. But it is a really entertaining group to talk to. I might have said this to you afterward, but I always look forward to offensive line interview days. There are guys have been guys in the past that are just kind of okay, but whether it's this year Wyatt Davis, Josh Myers, Kevin Woidke, Gavin Cupp was really entertaining. Brandon Bowen, Nick Petit-Frere. Brandon Bowen is fantastic to talk to. Brandon Bowen always has just interesting stuff to say.
He's a new dad now. I mean, his whole life has changed.
Yeah, he's a new dad. He's got coming back from that injury a year and a half ago, and that whole process. Those guys are just always fantastic to talk to, and it's remarkable to me. I feel like I've said this in print or on this podcast a dozen times since January, but to look at where they were in December at that position, just in that room, and what the depth looked like then, to where they are now, where Thayer Munford is out for the spring. You have, Jonah Jackson's not here yet, and it's still, they have a pretty good depth across the line. And Harry Miller's not here. Harry Miller's someone. I mean, we should talk about Harry Miller a little bit. He's someone who is coming in this summer. One of the things I heard Stud talk about was what Harry Miller can do right now and what Harry Miller is doing to get ready for his time in Columbus. He apparently just has been sending workout videos to Coach Mick Marotti, the strength coach for Ohio State, so that he can monitor Miller's workouts from afar. Miller, what did he say? He did 25 or 26 reps of 225 on the bench. Yeah, 26 reps. There are guys who have graduated Ohio State who go to the NFL draft combine who don't do 26 reps on the bench. This is someone who is still a high school kid. That is not normal. And he also mentioned that Harry Miller is FaceTiming into meetings. So they will set an iPad up in the front of the meeting room, and Harry Miller will watch film of, plays and sit through the meetings with them, even though he's not on campus yet. And that Stud will send him practice film, and Miller will come back and say, "Okay, period 2, play 19. Why did the left guard do this on that play?" Like he is taking this about as seriously as you can possibly take it. And offensive line is a tough place to get on the field early in your career. But if you were going to have someone get on the field very early in their career and look impressive while they were doing it, that is all the stuff that you would want them to be doing before they got to Columbus.
Yeah, and I wrote about it for Wednesday morning, where both Stud and Ryan Day think that he can come in and play right away or compete at least right away. He's Harry Miller's in Nicaragua right now on a mission, and he's still, like FaceTiming and studying and still getting his football stuff in. And what I think Ryan Day or Studrawa said is, that's one of the reasons why you think he can compete and play right away is because of how serious he takes this and how smart he is and how athletic he is. And so that's definitely a guy to watch. And they even said it. There's 5 guys that aren't even here right now that are going to add depth. Like you said, it's Munford, it's Harry Miller, it's Jonah Jackson, and it's DeJuan Jones and Enoch Mamahi, where they're not even here yet. And that's going to add to the depth of a group that is, you've got Brandon Bowen going back from right, left tackle. You've got, and Stud doesn't know where Brandon Bowen is going to end up yet. He's kind of a luxury position where he could be any 4 spots other than center. Nicholas Petit-Frere has only been at right tackle, and we've talked in the past why we thought that was, and it's because, our theory was that they want him to compete at right tackle for the job this fall, and Studrawa, he confirmed that to me this week, and that's why he's only playing that position right now, because they want him to be as good there as possible when August and September rolls around. Tom, I think now is a good time to talk about Nicholas Petit-Frere, who...
Longtime concern of this podcast.
Yes. He came to Ohio State. He's a skinny kid. Came to Ohio State, 268 pounds. But before he stood in front of Mickey Marotti, he drank 3 pounds of water. I don't know how many gallons that is. Is that like a gallon, half a gallon? He pounded some water, ballooned up to 271 for that first weigh-in, basically. And for a while now, they have had him on an 8,000 calorie a day diet, which is every sports writer's dream and many of our realities. So when we're talking to him this week, we asked him, what did you have yesterday? And so what he had was, and I can do this from memory, I believe, a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, then a bacon kielbasa egg and cheese sandwich, then some cereal, then a dozen wings from B-Dubs, along with a mac and cheese bowl, then 2 burgers from Five Guys. He didn't say anything about fries, but I think you probably have to get fries. And then because he was under his 8,000 calories, he still had to have some shakes. And I tallied up the food that he talked about, and it came to about 5,000 calories before the shakes. And that's a lot. Just the fact that he ate all of this and then he's still I'm still 3,000 calories short. And it's the poor guy. And he said he's a picky eater and it's tough. And yeah, everybody thinks it's great until he said, you have to take one for the team and eat that last burger, even though you feel like yakking. Tom, what would be your typical, if you had to go out tomorrow and put down 8,000 calories? Because we were talking afterwards, we could probably do 8,000 calories consuming. That wouldn't necessarily be eating, but there would be consumption of other things, calorie-ridden things. But if tomorrow you had to go out and put 8,000 calories down, how do you think you would do it?
This is the old Dr. Nick. The different food groups. If the window turns, if the paper, rub your food on a paper, and if the paper turns clear, it's your window to weight gain. I think what is it? The congealed group, the fried group, the the butterfat group. The important thing is mixing it up. I think you can have your Chipotle and go eat 2 Chipotle burritos or whatever it is.
Make sure to have chips too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. You want chips. Make that.
Coke,
just eat around that guacamole. It's just empty calories. It's just empty vitamins. Just eat around the banana in your banana split. Yeah, I think if you could mix it up. You go to Chipotle one day, then you go to B-Dubs the next day, and you go to I don't know, go get it. Yeah, go to Five Guys the next day and just, milkshakes with every meal. I'm sure that helps and keeps that meter spinning. I do think it is profoundly unfair that, he gains 20 pounds and everyone's like, wow, great job. I gained 20 pounds. What is it? No one says anything. Great. Oh, this seems
good
really,
anyway.
really nothing to my face anyway. Yeah, nothing. This all seems profoundly unfair.
IHOP right now, they were running a all-you-can-eat pancakes with an omelet purchase. So you can do some pretty good damage there. You can do 2,000 calories easy just for that breakfast. You get a nice fat omelet and then like a stack of pancakes. You can make that 2,000 calories. Then you won't want to eat until like 2:00, and yet you're only still a quarter of the way there. And I'm doing the math. It's like you would have to have, for me to do this, I would have to have like a milkshake every, like, you eat the 2,000 calorie breakfast, and then maybe around 10:30 you have a milkshake, and that's like another 1,000 calories. And then you go get the biggest, fattest burger that you can find, like the triple baconator or the Baconzilla at Rally's or any bacon laden thing, and then of course you've got to get the fries, and then maybe you can make, maybe that's 1,500 calories, but then you're still gonna have to have like another milkshake at like 2:30 before you go get dinner at like 6, and I'm sure anybody can go to Taco Bell right now and throw down 1,500 calories if you need to. But then even after all of that, you're probably still looking at like another like chocolate shake at like 8 or 9 o'clock, and maybe is there any cold pizza in the fridge just to get from 7,500 to 8,000. And he also said sometimes he has to wake up in the middle of the night and eat, and that's something that CJ Saunders told us in the past. Like they would want him to wake up in the middle of the night and eat like 3 or 4 peanut butter sandwiches and then go back to bed because it's just going to sit there. You're not going to burn it off. It sounds really unhealthy, but these are professionals telling him to do this, and they're like, Nicholas, do you have to eat well? And he's like, well, right now Mick just tells me to eat. And so you just it's an amazing life to live, I guess.
I talked to Javante Jean-Baptiste about his weight gain regimen back in December. I think it might have been in the pre-Rose Bowl time. And he was trying to get in 6,800 calories. So that's 1,200 less than Petite Frere is. 1,200 calories is like half of what a normal adult eats in a day. So his insane weight gaining regimen was that much less than Petite Frere's. And just to put this in perspective, because I don't think people, it's like, okay, that's a lot of food, and we can kind of tell you that's a lot of food. But at the time I wrote the Jean-Baptiste thing a couple months ago, I looked up the average American eats 4,500 calories on Thanksgiving. So think about how stuffed you are and the food coma you're in on the couch by, 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day, and then double it, eat twice that and do it every day. That is not a normal amount of food for a person to be consuming. And we just saw Mike Adams and J.B. Shugarts, a couple former Ohio State offensive linemen, at one of the practices this spring. And I looked at Adams and I'm like, who is that guy? I know him from somewhere. Where do I know him from? And I figured it out a couple minutes later. It's like, oh, that's Mike Adams, but he's lost 100 pounds. So he looks like a normal human being. He's tall, but he looks like a normal human being. He is no longer just completely just looks like the Hulk. And Shugarts is the same way. They are just normal-looking, tall human beings now, and they're still in good shape. They're just not in football, offensive line, defensive line kind of shape. So that's a real testament to how much goes into maintaining that offensive line weight.
You know how every person wants to take like one of those blocks of Velveeta and just eat it like an apple?
No, I don't actually.
then a stick of butter, and eat it like an apple.
Well, okay, there is a movie called what is it? The Day After The Day After Tomorrow or something like that, where it's the horrible aftermath. I think you could make a movie called The Day After Today about the horrible aftermath of eating a block of Velveeta cheese. What that next day would be like. No, thank you. Hard pass.
You said it. Hard pass.
I didn't even do that intentionally.
Let's talk about Ryan Day and the quarterbacks, because that's obviously always going to be a hot topic. When asked this week if there was a tier or an order to the quarterbacks right now, he said no, but they were going to start checking up on the completion percentage, going to run the numbers and see who has done what. And I don't know that would put any pecking order out there, Tom, but it would give them an idea of, either confirm what their eyes are telling them or confuse them even more. But now they're going to start looking at that data and begin to make not a decision, but judgments, I would say. And there's no reason to make a decision now. And I thought it was interesting. One of the things Kevin Wilson said was like, you can't put too much weight on what guys can and can't do right now in spring. If they can't do something, don't force it, because then it might just break and you won't even attempt it anymore. He's like, you got an entire offseason to also work on stuff and get better and be able to do stuff. So while they are going to be looking at numbers now and those completion percentage and successes in terms of finishing drives and reaching the end zone, as we've said many times, there's no reason to put one guy on top of the other now or name a starter. And Day he was very non-committal, or there's really no, I don't even remember what his answer was when he was asked, would you like to know or have an idea of who the starter was? I don't even know that he really had an opinion, because he's getting better at not telling us things. And so this role as head coach, he's taking to it well, and that sometimes he tells us a lot without telling us anything. And other times he's just like, nah, I don't want to get into that.
Unfortunately, Ryan Day is getting better at his job, which makes our jobs harder. It was way better when he liked us and was bringing us donuts and telling us the truth. That was
the glory days,
the good old days, the halcyon days of the early Ryan Day era, gone forever. Sad. You have to remember with the quarterback situation this year, they're not particularly incentivized to name a starter right now. Even if they thought for sure they have a starter in place, you're not really incentivized to do that, because, okay, let's say they name Justin Fields a starter right now. There's a chance Matthew Baldwin decides, okay, well, if he's going to be the starter the next 2 years, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can play, where I have a chance to play either this year or next year. And with the trend in quarterback transfers and guys being eligible immediately, that's something you probably have to be concerned about, because if he walks out the door, then you have Justin Fields, you have Chris Chuganoff, and end of list. Danny Vanatsky is a walk-on. He would be the third-string quarterback at that point. I don't think they're particularly incentivized to make a decision and announce a decision and have it written in stone at the end of spring practice. That I don't think it's probably going to be super clear cut at the end of spring practice anyway. So go ahead and take it into fall camp, and it certainly sounds like that's what they're planning on doing.
I wouldn't even name a starter until like October of 2020.
Until 2015. Wait, no, that didn't work out well. Let's think of another example.
All right. Tom, we'll go ahead and move this next part into our listener questions episode that will be dropping later this week, because we've got a bunch and we weren't going to be able to get to everything in this one single show. Let's finish up with the offer to Cincinnati linebacker Jaheim Thomas and what that means. And if you don't know who Jaheim Thomas is, or you do, he's the number 4 player in the state of Ohio. Like I said, he's from Cincinnati, Princeton, where he is teammates with Darian Henry, who is the number 2 player in the state, defensive end, the number 3 strong side defensive end, the number 41 player overall. And they are close friends with Paris Johnson, the 5-star number 1 offensive tackle in the nation who attends Cincinnati Xavier. And I wouldn't say they're a package deal, but finally offering Jaheim Thomas, who's a 4-star outside linebacker, number 21 outside linebacker in the nation, number 275 overall. Finally offering him, you would think would solidify some things with Paris Johnson, who has been visiting schools like he's still looking, and he's been committed to Ohio State for a while, but if you're visiting, you're still looking. Darian Henry, who says all the right things about Ohio State, but he's also looking at other schools. Everybody expects him to end up a Buckeye, but maybe this Jaheim Thomas offer, and he's also got offers from like Georgia and I think even Alabama. But I would say maybe he's the first domino to fall, but that was Paris Johnson. But it almost feels like Paris Johnson has set his domino back up, which I don't know that you can do. But maybe the offer to Thomas gets things rolling on these 3, and the Buckeyes can get them all in the fold relatively quickly.
It's going to be super interesting to see whether this ends the Paris Johnson World Tour, because for a committed player, he was not real subtle about where he was and who he was talking to, and posting pictures in Tennessee uniform, Georgia uniform. I mean, he was all over the place, all at schools that I believe had offered both Henry and Jaheim Thomas. So yeah. It will be super interesting to see whether this magically stops that or not. Ryan Day, I think, had a, I don't think Ryan Day was going to offer Jaheim Thomas specifically to get the other 2 guys. That's not something they're not going to give a scholarship offer to a guy who they don't think can compete or can play at Ohio State. But it sure seems like that's how they might. I would be put it this way. I would be pretty surprised if they didn't end up with all 3 of them in this class at that point. At this point, now you had mentioned Jaheim Thomas as a linebacker. That's where he's listed right now. Henry is listed as defensive end on all the recruiting sites. There's a possibility. Thomas is pretty big for a linebacker. Thomas may grow into a defensive end. Henry's pretty big for a defensive end. He may grow into a defensive tackle. Yeah. So with Thomas, there may have been some question about where he fit, and that was kind of the holdup on the offer. But now that he has the offer, I would think there's a pretty decent chance that all 3 of them end up at Ohio State. It'll just be really interesting to see whether they continue to visit other schools or whether this is really the end of the World Tour.
Thomas is basically the same size as Javonte Jean-Baptiste in high school, like 6'5", 215 in that area. It feels to me like that position as an outside linebacker is being phased out in this Ohio State defense, which may have also been a concern because we're talking about a base defense with 2 inside linebackers and a bullet. And a guy who is 6'5", 220 or whatever, eventually 230, is not necessarily any of those guys because he's a lanky guy. I don't know that he necessarily fits what they're doing. They don't have anybody else like him for a reason, I would assume, even though this is a brand new defense. So you've got who you've got. But yeah, I even have in my own notes here that does he eventually become a defensive end because of his frame, his height, and he's not he's not Dallas Gant, he's not Baron Browning, he's a different type of linebacker. Like I said, more like Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and maybe there was some concern, like how does he fit in this defense? And yeah, I mean, they're still going to need a Sam at times, but not often. In what the way things are looking like. So I agree. There's probably question, but even if they're on the fence, I think the lure of making Paris Johnson and Darian Henry happy would get them off of that fence. But it's also maybe a bit condescending to Jaheim Thomas to think he only got this offer because of the other 2. And we're not saying that, because I think he would have gotten it anyway. But it creates this, why hasn't he been offered yet when other schools were offering him? But as we know, schools, when an out-of-state school offers you, that's just, hey, we'd like to get to know you more. And as Urban Meyer says, when Ohio State offers an Ohio kid, it has to mean, or it could mean like, hey, come join us right now. And obviously they weren't quite convinced, and maybe they just needed to get to know him more. I mean, this is a brand new defensive staff. So maybe Greg Madison and Al Washington wanted to get to know him more. And if they are looking at him as a defensive end, then Larry Johnson would need to get to know him more. So I guess if you look at it that way, it's not as confusing as to why things took so long just to get him offered.
Right. And if you're not sure about where he's going to play, that's and does he really, really, really want to play linebacker? And if he really, really, really wants to play linebacker, is it more important to him to be at Ohio State or to be a linebacker if they want him to play defensive line? There's all sorts of stuff that kind of goes into these decisions that's beyond just the superficial, hey, this guy's ranked high, so you should offer him and he should come here because he plays in the state of Ohio. It's a little more complicated than that, but in the end, he's the kind of player that does not seem at all out of place at Ohio State. This is not a reach. This is not
right.
offering a guy whose only other offer was from Akron to get his talented teammate who you want. Like this is a guy who you look at his offer sheet. It's like, yep, this guy can play at a very high level. And if it was just a matter of figuring out where he fits exactly, then as long as this is not a last minute offer. There's still 8 months. So I could do math. 8 months until early signing day. It seems like a late offer because the recruiting cycle keeps getting moved up and up and up. But this is someone who certainly has. I mean, you look at his film; he's absolutely capable of playing at Ohio State and contributing at Ohio State. And so, like you said, do not read into this as a pity offer or solely a package offer. This is someone who they think and know can play, because those scholarships are precious, and they're not going to waste one just to get a package deal.
Right. This isn't Thad Matta throwing a bone to a scrub like Mike Conley to get Greg Oden. This is a guy that they feel can actually play. So that wraps today's show up. I want to thank everybody for listening. As always, thank you for the ratings and the reviews. Those are always appreciated. And we will have another show this week, listener questions, talking about the defense, Brendan White, the running game, Oreos, kickoff strategy, and various other things. And so look for that in a couple of days. Tom, you have anything?
Just if you do rate and review us, just send us a screenshot. I got one last week that I've got to send out a book. And if you do write us a review and just take a screenshot of that review, send it to me on just slide into my DMs on Twitter and send it to me, and I will get a book out to you, or a program or something. We've got all sorts of fun stuff we can send out as a thank you for listening and your support.
You know what? And then with the spring game coming here shortly, we need to grab like 40. We'll take a box of programs right there from the room with the printer. Nobody from Ohio State will be the wiser, and then we could just, assuming there would be programs for the spring game, of course.
Those highly sought after spring game programs, we could just sell those on eBay for $500 each.
And we won't need to do the podcast anymore because we will be rich.
Rich as astronauts.
All right, that's going to do it for this show. And like I said, a couple days from now, we'll have another one in your inbox. So have a good day, have a good night, and we will talk to you later.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say well, now say well. Oh yeah. Say well, now say well. We could steal a car and leave tonight.